My mother-in-law deleted my 8-year-old daughter's entire college fund, $92,000 saved since the day she was born, without asking a single person for permission. She did it at a family lunch, surrounded by people who love her, and she announced it like she was proud of herself. She said, "She doesn't need it anyway." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I calmly stood up, pulled out my phone, and showed everyone at that table the bank statement. I said the account was actually in her name, which means... And that is when the police arrived. Some people in my family still think I went too far. After everything you are about to hear, I want to know what you think. My name is Nora Scott. I am 38 years old. I have one daughter, Lily, who is 8, and I have been married to my husband, Daniel Ferreira, for 11 years. Daniel is a good man. He is kind and patient, and for most of our marriage, deeply committed to keeping the peace between me and his mother. His mother's name is Gloria Ferreira. She is 63 years old, she is a retired property manager from Scottsdale, Arizona, and she has never once in 11 years looked at me and seen anything other than a problem she had not yet solved. To understand what happened at that lunch, you need to understand how we got here. Because what Gloria did that afternoon did not happen in a vacuum. It was the last move in a very long game she had been playing since the night Daniel first brought me home for dinner, 14 years ago, when I was 24 years old and she looked at me across her dining room table and said, with a smile so polished it almost looked real, "Daniel tells me you work in insurance. That's very practical for someone without a degree." I had a degree. I had a bachelor's in finance from Arizona State. I just hadn't finished talking before she interrupted me. I should tell you about Daniel's family so you understand the full picture. Gloria has 3 children. Daniel is the middle child. His older brother, Renato Ferreira, is 42, runs a landscaping business in Mesa, and has been married to his wife, Claudia, for 15 years. They have 2 boys and a dog named after a Portuguese soccer player. Renato is not a bad person. He is the kind of person who agrees with whoever is in the room with him, which means he has spent most of his adult life agreeing with his mother. Daniel's younger sister, Simone Ferreira Alves, is 34, lives in Tempe, and has been Gloria's closest ally since approximately the day she was born. Simone and I have never had a genuine conversation. Every sentence she has ever directed at me has been a question designed to locate a weakness. Then there is Daniel's father, Eduardo Ferreira, who passed away 6 years ago from a heart attack. Eduardo was warm and funny, and the only person in that family who ever asked me follow-up questions when I talked about my work. His death left a vacuum in that household that Gloria filled entirely with her own authority, and nobody pushed back, because grief does complicated things to families, and Daniel was not built for confrontation with his mother. I loved Daniel. I still do. But I want to be honest with you. Loving someone does not mean you are blind to their patterns. And Daniel's pattern, for most of our marriage, was to absorb his mother's cruelty toward me like a sponge, apologize for it quietly in the car on the way home, and then show up to the next family event and let it happen again. I had my own pattern too. I smiled. I deflected. I kept my mouth shut and I built things in the background, quietly, the way you do when you understand that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous one. Let me give you the 3 incidents that defined how our family dynamic actually worked, because without them, what I did at that lunch table will look like an overreaction, and it was not. The first incident happened 18 months after Daniel and I got married. We were at Gloria's house for Easter, the whole family around a table that seated 12, and Gloria was talking about real estate. She had managed residential properties for 20 years and considered herself an authority on all things financial. She was explaining to Claudia why renting was throwing money away, which is a thing people say, and she turned to me and said very casually, "Nora, you should look into home buyer assistance programs. The state has programs for people in your income bracket." Everyone at the table heard it. Daniel looked at his plate. Renato refilled his water glass. Simone smiled at something on her phone. I did not correct her. I thanked her for the suggestion. And that evening, after we got home, I pulled up the file on our desktop and looked at the property we had purchased 4 months earlier. A 3-bedroom ranch house in Gilbert that we had bought without financing from Daniel's family, without asking Gloria's opinion, and without mentioning it at Easter dinner or any dinner before it. I had closed on that house using money I had saved over 7 years in the insurance industry, where I had built a client portfolio that was, at that point, generating enough in annual commissions that we could have bought a second property if we had wanted to. We had not wanted to. We had wanted to be left alone. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I did not mention the house to Gloria for another 3 weeks, and only then because Daniel let it slip at a birthday party, and she looked at me with an expression I can only describe as recalibration, like she had been running an equation, and suddenly the answer had changed without warning. She never apologized for the income bracket comment. She pivoted immediately to asking about the school district. The second incident happened 3 years after that, when Lily was 2. Gloria had been visiting for a long weekend, one of those visits that starts as 4 days and expands, quietly and without negotiation, into 6, and she was in our kitchen while I was on a work call in the back bedroom, the door mostly closed. I came out to get water and heard her telling Claudia, who was visiting for the afternoon, that she was genuinely worried about Lily's development because I was working so much. She said, and I am not paraphrasing this, children need a present mother, not a career. Claudia made a sympathetic sound. I stood in the hallway for approximately 4 seconds. Then I walked into the kitchen, poured my water, and said pleasantly that I had just confirmed a new group insurance contract with a regional healthcare network, and I would need to take a couple of calls over the next 2 days, and asked if anyone wanted coffee. Gloria said no. I made the coffee. And that evening I called my financial advisor, a woman named Lorna Baptista at a firm in Phoenix, and told her to increase Lily's college fund contribution by $500 a month. That account had been opened the week Lily was born. I had opened it myself, through a custodial structure that my attorney had recommended, a woman named Christine Oak, who I had been working with since the year before Lily arrived. Christine had been very clear about how the account was structured. I was the trustee, Lily was the beneficiary, and every dollar in that account was for one purpose and one purpose only. I funded it from my personal earnings, not from our joint account, because I had learned early in our marriage that keeping some things clearly mine was not a sign of distrust. It was a sign of intelligence. By the time Lily was 2, the account held a little over $30,000. I did not mention this to Gloria. I did not mention this to anyone in Daniel's family. I mentioned it to Christine and to Lorna and to Daniel, who understood and agreed, and that was sufficient. The third incident is the one that made me understand that Gloria was not simply thoughtless. She was deliberate. Lily was 5. She had just started at a small private elementary school in Chandler, a school we had chosen specifically because of its approach to early childhood development, and because it had a remarkable reading program that her pediatrician, Dr. Anand Pillai, had recommended after Lily's 4-year checkup. Dr. Pillai had noted that Lily was reading slightly above her age level and that a structured enrichment environment would serve her well. We enrolled her, we toured the school, we met her teacher, and we were genuinely excited about it. I mentioned the school at a family dinner. I said we had found a wonderful place for Lily and that she was already making friends and loving the reading program. Gloria set her fork down very slowly. Private school, she said, not quite a question, not quite a statement, in the tone of someone filing information for later use. For a 5-year-old. Then she looked at Renato and said, "Your boys did fine in public school." Renato nodded. Claudia looked at the bread basket. I let it go that night. But the following week, Daniel called me from work and said his mother had called him that morning and told him she had concerns about Lily's school and whether we were overcomplicating her childhood. Daniel, to his credit, told her it was our decision and that Lily was thriving. Gloria said she just wanted to share her perspective. Daniel told me about it while I was driving home, and I listened, and then I said very calmly, "Daniel, I love you. I am not pulling Lily out of that school." He said, "I know, I told her that." I believed him. I believed he meant it in that moment. But that phone call was the first time I thought, she is not going to stop. She's going to keep doing this until something makes her stop. And a person who will not stop on their own terms needs to encounter something bigger than their own will. That is when I went to see Christine Oak. I want to be clear about what my visit to Christine's office on February 7th of that year was and was not. It was not me being paranoid. It was not me preparing for war. It was me sitting down with a woman I trusted, laying out a situation I had been living in for the better part of a decade, and asking her a direct question. Given everything I have built and everything that exists in my daughter's name, am I as protected as I think I am? Christine's office was on the fourth floor of a building in downtown Phoenix. She had a glass wall behind her desk that looked out over the street, and she had a habit of flipping her pen over in her fingers when she was thinking, end over end, without looking at it. She did that for about 30 seconds after I finished talking. Then she said, "The college fund account is fine. The custodial structure is solid, but there are two things I want to flag." She put the pen down. "The first is access. Who has access to the account portal besides you?" I told her only me, through a login I had created and never shared. She nodded. "Good, keep it that way. Change the password today. Add two-factor authentication if you haven't already." I had not. I did it that afternoon, sitting in my car in the parking garage under her building. The second thing she flagged was documentation. She wanted a comprehensive record. Every deposit, every statement, every communication related to that account, stored somewhere that was not my home computer, somewhere I could access quickly if I ever needed to produce it. She said this not with alarm, but with the practiced evenness of someone who had watched enough family situations unfold to know that preparation cost less than litigation. I told her I understood. She told me to come back in 6 months for a review. I changed the password before I left the parking garage. I set up a cloud backup that same week, and I told exactly one other person what I had done. Daniel. Daniel listened. He sat across from me at our kitchen table after Lily was in bed, his hands around a mug of decaf he wasn't really drinking, and he listened to me lay out everything Christine had said. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You really think she'd do something?" I said I didn't know. I said I hope not. I said I was doing this because I loved our daughter and I was not willing to find out the hard way. He nodded slowly. He said, "Okay." And then he said, "I'll talk to her." I told him that was his choice to make and I was not asking him to do anything, only telling him what I had done. He talked to his mother that weekend. I don't know exactly what he said. She never brought up Lily's school again, not directly, and for a while I thought maybe it had worked. I thought maybe we had reached some kind of equilibrium. I should have known better. People like Gloria do not reach equilibria, they wait. Over the next 2.5 years, the account grew. I kept the monthly contributions consistent, and I added lump sums in years where my commission numbers came in strong. I had moved into regional sales management by then, with a team of 8 and a territory that covered most of the Southwest, and there were 2 years in a row where I cleared considerably more than I had projected. Lorna and I reviewed the investment allocations twice a year. By the spring of the year Lily turned 8, the account held $92,000. $92,000. I had built that from nothing, from the week my daughter was born, dollar by dollar over 8 years, because I believed that the single most powerful thing I could give her was a future she could not have taken from her. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because the next part of this story depends on you understanding what that number meant to me. It was not about the money. It was about what the money represented: 8 years of choices, 8 years of discipline, 8 years of watching other people in my husband's family look at me and see someone who needed correcting, and deciding every single time that the best response was not an argument. It was another deposit. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have known better, someone who was supposed to be family, you know exactly what that kind of silence costs. And you know what it feels like to build something in it. The spring of that year was busy. My territory numbers were strong. My team had just closed a large group contract with a multi-site employer in Tucson, and Lily was finishing 2nd grade with the kind of enthusiasm for learning that makes a parent feel like they did something right. She was reading chapter books on her own. She had a best friend named Daisy, and she had recently decided she wanted to be a marine biologist, a decision she had communicated to Dr. Pillai with complete seriousness at her annual checkup. Dr. Pillai had told her that was an excellent ambition and recommended a summer science camp at the University Extension Program in Tempe. I had already put the deposit down. Things felt, for a stretch of several weeks, genuinely good. The first sign that something had shifted came on a Tuesday afternoon in May, when Daniel came home from a dinner with his mother looking like a man who had survived something. I asked him how it went. He said fine, but the way he said it was the way people say fine when they mean several other things and have not decided which one to lead with. I waited. He sat down on the edge of the couch and said his mother had asked him again about Lily's school, whether we were doing the right thing, and whether we had put aside enough for her real future. I looked at him. Her real future. He ran his hand over his face. I know. What did you say? I told her Lily's future is well taken care of. He paused. She asked me how much is in the college fund. The room was very still. What did you tell her? I said I didn't know the exact number. He looked up. Which is true, you handle it. I studied his face. He was not lying. He genuinely did not know the exact number. I had given him a general sense of the range, but I had been deliberate about keeping the specifics between me and Christine. It was not distrust of Daniel. It was that I had learned, quietly and over time, that information shared with Daniel had a way of eventually finding its way to Gloria, not because he was careless, but because she was relentless, and relentless people wear down even good ones. I thanked him for not giving her more. I kissed him on the cheek. I went upstairs and sat at my desk and pulled up the account portal and looked at the balance for a long time. Then I called Christine. It was a short call. I told her about Daniel's dinner, about Gloria's questions, about the specific phrasing, her real future that had lodged in my throat. Christine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, I want you to do something for me this week. Pull the full statement for the last 12 months. Download it as a PDF. Save it somewhere you can access from your phone. I asked if she was concerned. She said, I'm always prepared. I'd like you to be too. I downloaded the statement that night. I saved it in 2 places, the cloud folder I had set up after our February meeting and directly to my phone. I went through every line, every deposit, every quarterly reinvestment, every balance confirmation. $92,411 and some cents, 12 months of perfect, unbroken history. I sent Christine a message that the file was saved. She replied with a single sentence. Good, see you at the June review. The June review was 6 weeks away. I want to tell you about the second close call, because it happened 10 days before the lunch, and looking back now, I understand it was not a coincidence. It was reconnaissance. Simone came by the house on a Saturday, ostensibly to return a casserole dish she had borrowed from me 3 months earlier, which I had genuinely forgotten she had. She came in, she had coffee, she played with Lily for a few minutes, and she was entirely pleasant in the careful, surface-level way she could manage when she wanted something. I offered her lunch. She declined. She asked how work was going. I said well. She asked if we were still happy with Lily's school. I said yes. She asked, very casually, turning the coffee mug in her hands, is Daniel's name on everything for Lily's accounts? Like, does he have full access or is it mostly you? I picked up the casserole dish from the counter where she had set it and put it in the cabinet. It's structured the way our attorney recommended, I said. Why? She waved her hand. Mom was asking, just family stuff, you know how she is. She smiled. She likes to feel included. I smiled back. Of course. Simone left 20 minutes later. I stood at the kitchen window and watched her car pull out of the driveway. Lily came in from the backyard with grass on her shoes and asked what we were having for lunch. Grilled cheese, I said. Yes. She pumped her fist in the small, whole-body way 8-year-olds do when something pleases them and went to wash her hands. I took my phone off the counter and sent Christine a message. Can we move the June review up? She replied within the hour. Tuesday at 2. Tuesday came. Christine's pen did its end-over-end rotation twice before she set it down. She had pulled up everything before I arrived. She went through the account structure with me again, more deliberately this time, confirming access logs, confirming that no secondary authorization had been added, confirming that the account's contact information was tied to my personal email and not the joint account Daniel and I shared. Everything was clean. Everything was exactly as it should have been. I left her office with 2 things, a printed copy of the full statement folded into my bag and a certainty that sat low and heavy in my chest, the kind that does not come from paranoia but from pattern recognition. Something was coming. I did not know what form it would take. I did not know when. But I knew that Gloria had been asking questions, and Gloria did not ask questions she didn't already have a use for. I drove home with the radio off. What happened 4 days later, at a family lunch in Gloria's house, on a Saturday afternoon in late June, with Daniel and Renato and Claudia and Simone all around that same table where I had been told, 14 years ago, that it was practical to have no degree, was the thing I had been quietly, methodically, deliberately preparing for since the day Lily was born. I did not know, as I sat down at that table, that Gloria had accessed the account 3 days earlier. I did not know she had used a piece of information she had no business having, obtained through a method I am still furious about when I let myself think on it too long. I did not know that by the time the soup was on the table, $92,000 of my daughter's future had already been moved somewhere it was never supposed to go. What I did know was that I had that statement on my phone, saved in 2 locations, time-stamped and complete. I knew Christine Oak's number by heart. I knew exactly what that account was, what it meant, and whose name was on it. I set my napkin in my lap. I accepted a glass of water from Renato, who poured it without making eye contact. Lily was at home with a babysitter, a detail I had arranged deliberately, because there are some tables a child should not be made to sit at, and I had a feeling about this one. Daniel sat beside me, close enough that our arms touched, and for a moment he caught my eye and I could see in his face that he knew something was off too, that the air in his mother's dining room had the particular quality it gets when Gloria has made a decision and is waiting for the right moment to announce it. She announced it during the main course. She set down her fork. She looked at me across the table with an expression I can only describe as the face of someone who has convinced themselves that what they are doing is generous. And she said, in a voice clear enough for everyone at that table to hear, that she had taken care of the college fund. She had moved the money to a family account she controlled. She said it was better managed this way. She said she had spoken to her own financial advisor about it, and the arrangement was more sensible. She said she doesn't need it anyway. And then she picked her fork back up, as if she had just mentioned the weather. Daniel's hand went flat on the table beside me, like something had shut off. Renato looked at the salt shaker. Claudia blinked 3 times fast, the way she does when she is processing something she does not want to be part of. Simone looked at her plate. I did not yell. I want to be very clear about that, because I know how these moments are supposed to go in the telling. The wronged person screams, the table erupts, someone throws something. That is not what happened. What happened was that something very quiet and very settled moved through me, the way a tide comes in rather than a wave, and I felt every single thing I had built over 8 years arrange itself in a single clean line. I calmly stood up. I picked up my phone. I opened the saved statement, the one Christine had told me to keep accessible, the one I had saved in 2 places, the one that showed every deposit, every balance, every date going back to the week my daughter was born. I held it up and I showed it to everyone at that table, turning it so that each of them could see the screen clearly. And I said, the account was actually in her name, which means what you just did is not a financial decision. It's a crime. Gloria opened her mouth. Then she closed it. I said, the account was set up as a custodial trust through our family attorney. I am the sole trustee. Lily is the beneficiary. No other person has authorization to move, transfer, or access those funds. Not you. Not Daniel. Not a financial advisor you consulted without my knowledge. The access that was used to initiate that transfer 3 days ago was unauthorized. I lowered the phone. That is called theft. In this state, at this dollar amount, it is a felony. Gloria said, I was trying to help. I'm not finished. She stopped. I looked at each person at that table. Renato, who had set the salt shaker down. Claudia, whose hands were in her lap. Simone, who was staring at the tablecloth. Daniel, who was very still beside me, and who I could feel making some enormous internal recalibration. I have the full account statement on my phone, including the access log showing when the transfer was initiated and from what device. I have my attorney's contact information, and I have already been advised on exactly what steps follow unauthorized access to a custodial account. I picked up my bag from the back of my chair. I'm going to step outside and make a call. When I come back in, I'd like to talk about how we resolve this in a way that keeps things out of a courtroom. But I want to be clear about something first. That money goes back, all of it, before the end of this week. If it does not, I will let the legal process run its course, and I will not apologize for that. I walked to the front door. I opened it. I stepped out onto Gloria's front porch into the bright Saturday afternoon, and I called Christine Oak. Christine answered on the second ring. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, Nora, I need you to listen to me carefully. Don't go back in there yet. Call the non-emergency police line first and report the unauthorized transfer. I know that feels like escalation, but you need a report number before anything else moves. Do you understand? I said I did. She said, then call me back. I'll have a motion drafted by Monday. I ended the call with Christine. I stood on that porch for a moment, looking out at the quiet street, at the neighbor's sprinkler going in slow arcs across a lawn that needed it. Then I dialed the non-emergency line. I was explaining the situation to the dispatcher, calm, factual, giving the account numbers and the dollar amount and the date of the unauthorized transfer, when I heard the front door open behind me. I turned. Renato was standing in the doorway. He looked like a man who had just realized he had been sitting at the wrong table for a very long time. He said quietly, "Is there anything I can do?" I looked at him. For a moment I felt something shift, not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. He had always agreed with whoever was in the room. Today he had walked out of his mother's room to stand on a porch with me. That was not nothing. I said into the phone, "Yes, I'll hold." Then I looked at Renato. "You can go back inside and make sure nobody leaves before the officers arrive." He nodded once. He went back inside. The dispatcher came back on the line. I finished giving her the information. She told me a unit would be there within 20 minutes. I sat down on the porch steps. I looked at the neighbor's sprinkler. I breathed. 20 minutes. Everything I had built over 8 years had led to this porch, this phone call, this afternoon. I had not wanted any of this. I had wanted a family that behaved like one. I had wanted a mother-in-law who looked at me and saw a person instead of a category. I had wanted to hand my daughter 92,000 reasons to reach for whatever future she decided she deserved, without having to defend that gift to anyone. But what I had built, quietly, methodically, while Gloria asked questions at dinner tables and Simone returned casserole dishes and Renato agreed with whoever was talking, was not just a college fund. It was a documented, legally structured, professionally maintained record of exactly what belonged to my daughter and exactly who had taken it. That, it turned out, was enough. 14 minutes later, 2 officers pulled up in front of Gloria Ferreira's house on a bright Saturday afternoon in late June, walked up the front path, and knocked on the door that I had left open. The first officer's name was Officer Tran. She was compact and unhurried, and she had the particular stillness of someone who had walked into a great many situations that had started as family lunches. Her partner, Officer Delgado, was younger, broader, and stood slightly behind her with a notepad already open. They stood in Gloria's doorway, and Officer Tran said, pleasantly, "Who called this in?" I raised my hand from the porch steps. "I did." She looked at me. She looked at the open front door, through which the sound of complete silence was emanating from a dining room that had, 12 minutes earlier, contained 6 adults and a serving dish of roasted potatoes. "Would you like to come inside and explain the situation?" I stood up. I smoothed my shirt. I walked up the 2 porch steps and through the front door of my mother-in-law's house for what I was already certain would be the last time I walked through it on her invitation. The dining room looked like a painting that had been left unfinished. Everyone was still at the table. Renato had come back from the porch as I had asked and was sitting with both hands visible on the tablecloth, looking at a fixed point slightly above the centerpiece. Claudia had pushed her chair back a few inches, not enough to leave, just enough to signal that she was not committed to staying. Simone had her phone in her hand, but was not looking at it. Daniel was standing now, one hand on the back of his chair, and he looked at me when I came in with an expression I recognized, the expression of a man who has spent years trying to hold 2 things together and has just watched them separate completely and is not sure yet whether he is relieved or terrified. Gloria was still at the head of the table. She had not moved. She had her hands folded in her lap and her chin up, and she was performing, with considerable effort, the expression of someone who has done nothing wrong and is merely tolerating an inconvenience. The performance was not working. There was a tightness around her mouth that had not been there when she made her announcement. Her composure was intact, but only in the way that a wall is intact right before the water comes through. Officer Tran stepped into the dining room and looked around in the professional, unhurried way that does not miss anything. "Can someone tell me what happened?" I told her. I kept it short and factual. Custodial trust account, established 8 years ago, funded entirely by me, access credentials held only by me. Unauthorized transfer initiated 3 days prior. Amount $92,000. I held up my phone with the statement and the access log visible. Officer Tran leaned in slightly to look. She did not touch the phone. She looked at Officer Delgado, who was writing. Gloria's voice came out very controlled. I was trying to protect my granddaughter's future. The account wasn't being managed properly. Officer Tran turned to look at her with an expression that was entirely neutral. "Are you the account holder?" "I'm her grandmother." That wasn't the question. A beat. "Are you the account holder or an authorized signatory on this account?" Gloria's hands, still folded in her lap, pressed together more tightly. "I have my family's best interests at heart." "Ma'am." Officer Tran's voice did not change temperature at all. "I need you to answer the question directly. Are you an authorized user on this account? The silence that followed lasted 4 full seconds. Simone looked up from her phone for the first time since the officers had entered. Claudia's hands came up from her lap and settled on the table like she was bracing for something. Renato exhaled slowly through his nose. "No," Gloria said, finally. "Not formally." Officer Tran nodded once. She looked at me. "Do you have documentation of the account structure and the unauthorized transfer?" "Yes." I forwarded the statement and access log to my own email while she watched, then pulled up the email on the screen so the timestamps were visible. "My attorney also has copies. Her name is Christine Oak. I spoke with her 30 minutes ago. If you're still with me, stay, because what happens in the next hour is exactly why I built everything the way I built it." Officer Delgado looked up from his notepad. "We're going to need to take a report. Is there somewhere we can do this privately?" He was looking at me. I said yes and followed him to the hallway. We sat at the small table near the front window where Gloria usually left her keys and her mail. I gave him everything: account numbers, the name of the financial institution, the date and time of the transfer, Christine's contact information, and the name of the financial advisor Gloria had claimed to have consulted, which she had mentioned during her announcement. I did not know that advisor's name. I said so. He wrote that down too. It took about 20 minutes. When we came back into the dining room, Officer Tran had been talking quietly with Gloria, who was no longer performing composure. She was sitting with her arms crossed tightly across her chest, and there was a flatness to her expression now that I had not seen before, not anger, not defiance, but something that looked more like the first recognition that a situation had moved out of her control permanently. Officer Tran told Gloria that a report had been filed. She explained that the financial institution would be contacted and that the transfer would likely be flagged pending an investigation. She said that the dollar amount involved elevated the matter to a level that would be referred to the Financial Crimes Unit. She used the word felony in the same neutral tone she had used for everything else. Gloria said, "I am this child's grandmother. I acted in her best interest." Officer Tran looked at her for a moment. "The law doesn't recognize family relationship as authorization on a custodial financial account. An attorney will explain your options. I'd recommend you contact one today." She turned to address the room generally. "Is there anything else anyone here needs to report?" Nobody spoke. She gave me her card. She told me Christine could reach the reporting officer directly using the case number she had written on the back. She thanked everyone for their cooperation in the way that people with authority thank rooms full of people who have not, in fact, been particularly cooperative. Then she and Officer Delgado walked back down the front hall and out the front door, and the house was quiet. The roasted potatoes were still on the table. I looked at Daniel. He was looking at his mother. The look on his face was something I had not seen in 11 years of marriage, a kind of grief that was not soft, not protective, but exhausted. Like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had just set it down and was not sure he was glad to be free of it. Renato broke the silence first. He pushed back his chair. He looked at his mother, and his voice came out very carefully, the way you carry something fragile across a room. "Mom, what did you do?" It was not a question. It was a sentence that had been building in Renato Ferreira for probably longer than even he realized, and it came out in 6 words with nothing decorative around it. Gloria looked at her oldest son. Something moved across her face, not remorse, not yet, but the first crack in the certainty she had walked into this afternoon with. "I did what I thought was right for this family." "You took money from Lily?" Renato's voice dropped. "From an 8-year-old's college account." "I secured it. I put it somewhere I could manage. You're not her parent." Renato leaned forward slightly. "You're not her trustee. You're not anything on that account, Mom. You heard the officer. You heard what she said." Claudia reached over and put her hand on Renato's arm, not to stop him, just to be present for it. Simone still hadn't spoken. She was looking at the tablecloth with the focused attention of someone trying very hard not to look like they knew something. I had been watching her since the officers arrived, and I had clocked the thing she didn't want clocked. She had known. Not everything, maybe, but something. The visit with the casserole dish. The questions about account access. She had been the instrument Gloria had used to figure out what was in place before she moved. Simone had not stolen anything, but she had handed her mother the map. I let that sit for a moment. I stored it for later. Daniel walked around the table and came to stand beside me. He did not take my hand or say anything. He just stood there close with his shoulder against mine, and that was enough. Gloria looked at us both. The flatness in her expression was cracking in a way that was not becoming. "Daniel, you know I love that child." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then you'll give the money back. I will discuss this with my financial mom. His voice came out harder than I had ever heard it. There is no discussion. You took money from my daughter, from Nora's account. You did it without asking anyone. You did it without permission. And you are going to return every dollar of it before the end of this week, or I will support every legal step Christine recommends. He paused. Every single one. Gloria looked at him with the expression of a woman who had held enormous influence over her middle child for 40 years, and was watching that influence reorganize itself into something she did not recognize. Her hand went to her collarbone. She always did that when she was cornered. I had noticed it in year 2 of our marriage, the automatic reach for the gold chain she wore every day. Her fingers found it and held it. I was trying to help, she said, and her voice was different now, quieter. Something had gone out of it. You were trying to control it. I heard my own voice come out very level. There's a difference, and I think you know that. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she looked away. That was when I took the printed statement out of my bag, the one Christine had told me to carry, the one I had folded in there before leaving the house that morning, not because I had known exactly what was coming, but because I had spent 8 years learning to be prepared. I set it on the table in front of the empty seat between me and where Renato had been sitting. I did not slide it toward Gloria. I did not make a performance of it. I just put it down where everyone could see it. This is the full account statement, I said. 12 months, every deposit, every balance confirmation, every access event, yours is logged. The date, the time, the device, all of it. I kept my voice calm. Christine is filing a motion Monday morning to freeze any account the funds were transferred into, pending investigation. If the money is returned in full before then, there is a conversation to be had about next steps. If it is not returned, we let the process run. Gloria looked at the statement. She did not pick it up. How did you even? Simone started and then stopped. I turned to look at her. How did I have all of this ready? Simone's mouth closed. Because I have been managing this account for 8 years, I said. Because I have an attorney I trust and a financial advisor I consult twice a year. Because 3 weeks ago, when you came to my house and asked whether Daniel had access to Lily's accounts, I understood what that question was really for. I let that land. I don't think you realized what you were helping set up. I think you thought you were having a casual conversation. But I want you to understand what that conversation cost your mother. Simone looked like she had swallowed something that didn't agree with her. She looked at Gloria. Gloria did not look back. Renato stood up. He pushed his chair in neatly, the way you do when you are ending something properly. He looked at me and said quietly, I'm sorry, I should have said something a long time ago. He looked at Daniel. Call me tonight? Daniel nodded. Renato touched Claudia's shoulder. She stood. They got their things from the side table, where they had left them when they arrived. Claudia paused at the door to the dining room and looked back at me, and she said simply, It was good to see you, Nora, in a tone that meant something much more than the words. Then they left. The house was very quiet. Simone stood up next. She did not look at her mother. She did not look at me. She picked up her bag and she said, to no one in particular, I need to go. She walked out. We heard the front door close behind her. That left me and Daniel and Gloria at the table with the roasted potatoes and the printed account statement and the weight of everything that had just been said. Gloria looked at Daniel again. Her voice, when it came, had lost its architecture. I thought I was doing the right thing. Daniel sat down across from her. I watched him, and I watched him find something he had clearly been looking for a long time, not anger, which he was not built for, but clarity. The right thing, he said slowly, would have been to ask Nora. It would have been to treat her like a member of this family for 11 years. It would have been to stop treating everything she builds as a problem you have to manage. He folded his hands on the table. This is the last time, Mom. Whatever happens with the legal process, whatever Christine files, I'm not going to stand in the way of it. And I'm not going to ask Nora to stand in the way of it either. Gloria's chin dropped. Not dramatically, not a collapse, just the small, specific defeat of someone who has held a position for a very long time and has run out of ground to hold it on. She reached for her gold chain. Her fingers held it for a moment. Then she let it go. I picked up the printed statement from the table and put it back in my bag. The confrontation was over. The legal process was just beginning. Christine had the motion drafted by Sunday evening. She called me at 6:15 that night, after Lily was in bed, and walked me through it with the clean, deliberate efficiency that had made me trust her from the first meeting. The financial institution had already been notified through official channels. The transfer, which had been routed into a personal savings account in Gloria's name at a different bank, had been flagged. The receiving bank had put a hold on the funds pending the investigation. Christine said the word hold in the tone of a person who has used it before and knows exactly what it means for the person on the other end. She also said something I had not expected. She said the access method Gloria had used, a physical device registered to the account that had apparently been cloned or replicated from information she had obtained, elevated the matter beyond simple unauthorized transfer. She said the financial crimes investigator would make that determination, not us. She said I should not read into it yet. But she said it in the tone of a person who has already read into it. I asked if there was anything I needed to do before Monday. She said no. She said, "You've already done everything. You did it 8 years ago when you set the account up right, and you did it 3 weeks ago when you changed the password and backed up the statements." There was a pause. "Get some rest." I thanked her. I ended the call. I went downstairs and Daniel was at the kitchen table with his hands around a mug of decaf he wasn't really drinking, and I sat down across from him and we were quiet together for a while. He said, "How are you?" I thought about it honestly. "I'm tired, I'm angry, but I'm okay." He nodded. He looked at the mug. "I called Renato. We talked for about an hour." He looked up. He knew she had been asking questions about the account. He didn't know she'd acted on it. He said if she'd told him what she was planning, he would have stopped her. "I believe him," I said, "and I did. I should have protected you better over the years." He said it simply, without the kind of extensive qualification that makes apologies easier for the person giving them. "I made it easier for her by not making it harder." I looked at him across the table. "I know," a pause. "I need it to be different now, not eventually. Now." "It will be," he said. I believed that too. Gloria returned the funds on Thursday, 4 days after the lunch, 1 day before Christine's filing deadline. The transfer was confirmed by the financial institution that afternoon, and Christine sent me a single message. "Full amount, confirmed, access log updated. I'll send the formal confirmation tomorrow." $92,411, back where it belonged. The financial crimes investigation did not close with the return of the money. That is not how felony investigations work. The receiving bank had already submitted its report. The investigating officer made contact with Christine the following week and informed her that the access method used, the cloned credential, constituted a separate offense from the transfer itself. Christine told me this with her characteristic evenness, and I listened, and I told her to let the process run. I was not going to intervene in a legal investigation to make things easier for someone who had stolen from my daughter's future without a second thought. Gloria hired an attorney. I know this because Renato told Daniel, and Daniel told me. I did not ask for details. I did not need them. Christine had everything she needed, and the matter was in hands more capable than mine. What happened to Gloria in the months that followed was the consequence not of my anger, I want to be clear about that, but of her own choices and the legal weight they carried. The criminal investigation resulted in a formal charge of unauthorized financial access, a felony under Arizona statute, filed in September. Her attorney negotiated a plea arrangement that involved restitution, already completed, supervised probation, and a requirement that she complete a financial ethics course that I will admit, when I heard about it, produced in me a feeling I can only describe as a very quiet, very complete satisfaction. She did not go to prison. I had not asked for that. But she had a record now, and she had consequences, and the version of herself that could walk into a family gathering and announce the theft of a child's college fund as though it were a kindness, that version no longer had the ground to stand on. Simone called me in October. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 3 minutes long and contained the phrase, "I didn't know what she was going to do," 4 times, which told me approximately everything I needed to know about what she did know. I did not call back. Daniel handled that relationship on his own terms, and whatever he decided about his sister was his to decide. Renato and Claudia came for dinner in November. Renato brought wine and spent 45 minutes on the back porch with Daniel, while Claudia helped me with the salad and talked about her older son's soccer season, and it was the most normal evening I had spent with anyone in Daniel's family in 11 years. At one point, Renato came back in from the porch and looked at me and said, "She's not coming to Christmas." I didn't ask which version of that sentence he meant. I said, "Okay." He nodded. We ate dinner. Lily is thriving. She finished second grade with the reading assessment 3 levels above her age group, which her teacher described with the particular delight of someone who has genuinely watched a child surprise them. Dr. Pillai confirmed at her 8-year checkup that she was exactly where she should be, healthy, curious, and still planning to be a marine biologist, a commitment she has now held for 14 months, which for an 8-year-old is essentially a lifetime. She went to the University Extension Science camp that summer. She came home with a project about bioluminescent plankton and talked about it for 3 weeks. The college fund sits at $94,300 now, with the September contribution added and the quarterly reinvestment confirmed. I reviewed the statement with Lorna last month, and we adjusted the allocation slightly, moving a portion into a longer horizon index position that she'd been recommending for 2 years. The account is clean. The access log shows only my credentials. The 2-factor authentication prompt comes to my phone every time someone tries to log in, and every time it lights up, I feel something that is not quite satisfaction and not quite relief, but lives somewhere between them. Christine's invoice for the full matter was the most worthwhile bill I have ever paid. Daniel and I are fine. We are, in some ways I did not expect, better than we have been in years, not because the crisis fixed us, but because the thing it exposed had needed to be exposed for a long time, and dealing with it honestly turned out to be less damaging than carrying it quietly. We are still married. We are still, most evenings, 2 people who sit at a kitchen table with mugs they are not really drinking from and talk about things that matter. Lily asked me last month why Grandma Gloria hadn't come to her birthday. She asked it the same way she asks most things, directly, without the layered performance of an adult question, just an 8-year-old who noticed something and wanted to know why. I said, Grandma and I had a disagreement, and we're giving each other some space. Lily thought about that for a moment. Is it like when me and Daisy had a fight about the project? A little bit like that. Did you work it out? I thought about Christine's invoice, and the access log, and the probation agreement, and the November dinner with Renato, and the $94,000 sitting quietly in a properly structured custodial account that belongs to the small person currently looking at me with a crayon in her hand and plankton knowledge in her head. We're working on it, I said. She nodded, satisfied with that, and went back to her drawing. That was enough for me. So, did I go too far, or not nearly far enough? Tell me what you think in the comments.